So there you are, fighting the ultimate boss battle to end all boss battles. This is your 42nd try, but you're feeling good about this one. You dodge their attacks perfectly and go for the final blow. Your strike hits, and you shed a sigh of relief as the ending cutscene plays on screen and goosebumps crawl down your skin. Afterward, the credits play as you relax and go on your phone while listening to the music. But then what? Do you get sent back to the title screen with nothing but an achievement for your efforts? Do you get put right back where you were before the fight? There's so many different ways the ending process can occur. Video games aren't always meant to be one-time experiences, and it's the job of the developer to find the best way in which to encourage the player to keep playing after that initial win. Today, we're going to explore their options and figure out how to end a video game. Before we get into endings and such, I want to explain what exactly I mean by ending. I mean what happens after the game ends, not the ending itself. I'm in no place to judge if a game's story comes to a close. I've never actually read a text box. Anyways, now that you get it, I have to do my Retrovortex thing and separate everything into categories. First will be games that automatically restart when you beat them, then games that give you an option to restart, and games that give you no restart option. The games with restarts will be separated into two subcategories, New Game Plus and Non-New Game Plus. And for those who aren't exactly clear on what New Game Plus or NG Plus is, it's a system where you can restart a game into a harder version, which can include anything from enemy buffs to a character debuff, but they usually don't change the contents of the game too much. Now that that's out of the way, we can get started. My least favorite way that games can be ended personally is being thrown straight into NG Plus after completion. This only really works if the story is based around it and there's only one ending possible, and even then it leaves no room for exploration once you've beaten the game, making the player go through a whole nother save just to find out bits and pieces that they didn't the first time. One game I've experienced that has this in place is Unworthy, and even though it fits with the story, and after 2 more playthroughs I was able to get to the alternate ending, I was annoyed that I had to play through the exact same game in a very similar way 3 times, with each consecutive playthrough harder than the last. Although the gameplay loop in the game was fun, after that long of the time it did start to get a bit repetitive, and that's the main obstacle that a restart NG Plus game is faced with: tedium, especially if the ending requires you to play a certain type of way. A game that works around this though is Undertale, and it does this without an NG Plus. Undertale gets around the monotony of restarting with its system of different routes, the pacifist and genocide routes. Pursuing these on subsequent playthroughs is a whole different experience. In one, fighting is discouraged and you focus on making friends with everyone, while in the other, fighting is the only way through. You must pursue a harder path to complete the game. This obviously has much more depth than an NG Plus enemy buff. Without this mechanic, restarting games without NG Plus offers almost no replay value, as the only reason to play the game again would be to experience the same thing, but faster. I'm not gonna get into speedrunning here because I'm an actual human being, and that's a whole different angle. In Undertale's case, it also helps that the difficulty is not core to the experience, as most games that offer NG Plus use it as a chance to test your skills, and in an RPG like Undertale, it's just not necessary. Speaking of difficult games though, we fall upon the video game industry's darling child, FromSoft. All the modern FromSoft games offer optional restarts with a New Game Plus feature, but to choose just one of them, I feel like Sekiro fits the mold. After you beat one ending in Sekiro, you can't just go and get another one on the same file. It wouldn't make sense with the story. However, you aren't forced into a different save right off the bat. This is nice since there's a lot of game that the player could have possibly missed by just going for one ending. A lot of the bosses, places, and upgrades aren't required, so an open ending gives you the chance to go beat, explore, and gather them all if you've already completed the story. This isn't even mentioning that the gameplay loop is skill-based in a way that the NG Plus is an even more exciting adventure than the first. To beat the easiest ending on your first go-round, you don't really have to master the parry, but as you start getting into the later New Game Pluses, you have to learn when to attack, to parry, or to not fight at all. A complex combat system is crucial for an engaging New Game Plus, as the only real opportunity that it offers is one to hone the multiple skills that you've already gained. Without a multitude of skills, there's not much a game can do to keep you entertained. If your game doesn't have this complexity, what do you do then? For the answer to this question, we're going to have to look at something called a AAA open world RPG. I know what you might be thinking, Red plays AAA RPGs? And the answer is no, I don't. So as an example, I picked the latest one, at least when I wrote this, the Halo Infinite campaign. To prepare, I played one match of the online multiplayer and watched one video about it, so now I can confidently say that I'm an expert on the topic. My reasoning for doing this is that most AAA open world RPGs, Halo Infinite included, have an optional restart with no NG+. The optional restart in this case isn't on the same file, but to play the game again you have to start up a new file, which falls into the optional restart category because you can keep playing on your old one if you want to. As an open world game, Infinite has much more to offer than just the main storyline, so it wouldn't make sense to cut the game off after the ending. As for the fact that it has no New Game Plus, it's just not common in open world games such as the new Halo. NG Plus is commonly substituted by different difficulty options, therefore creating a difficulty cap at the start of a playthrough rather than a few playthroughs in. Difficulty options have the same effect on a game as New Game Plus, but they aren't scalable to the same level. There's only going to be 1 or 2 hard modes, but once you beat them, there's nowhere to go from there. I can make a whole video talking about my opinions on difficulty options, but that's missing the point. A better point of contention is whether the player should be able to achieve multiple endings in the same file, something only possible in a game with no restart. You probably know where I'm going with this. I'm going to talk about Hollow Knight. After you get any ending in Hollow Knight, you end up right where you started before the battle. This doesn't fit into the story very well because the knight dies in most of the endings, but it gives the players so much more freedom to immerse themselves in the world. In a game that only takes 11% to finish, it's important to let the player to do more than just beat the game. If the experience ended there, it would encourage many players to stop and give up before reaching any of the harder endings. This way, nobody has to go through the tutorial again unless they want an achievement. Because, well, they don't need it. They've beaten the game. This is also a consequence of being a large Metroidvania. Of course, more areas will be optional than most games, and you don't want to restrict access to the player. In a sense, it builds replayability without having to replay the parts of the game that you've since mastered. With all this information, we can draw a few conclusions of how to best end a game, depending on the genre and style. For story-driven RPGs, it's better to have an automatic restart. Once you're done, you're done. There's no story left for you to uncover. For combat-driven RPGs, an optional restart is optimal, but if the game is linear enough for the player to have experienced everything by the end, it's unnecessary. For open-world RPGs, however, an optional restart is essential. There's no way that anyone will get the full value of an entire open world during the base game. Lastly, for combat-driven RPGs with separate and distinct endings, no restart is needed to give the player the best chance of discovering all that the game has to offer. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you like this concept. It's been nagging at me for a while now, and I thought I would take a crack at it. If you have any opinions on the topic, feel free to comment, and remember to like and subscribe. I'll see you next video. Peace.